Phil Peter is known to many of you. He, of course, did lots of great work at First Chance for Children. He's back at the law school now, but we sort of nudged him back into the Cradle to Career model. It has been conceptual until we got Phil on board, and now it's materialized as a real program, and we're in a real network. So thank you for being here, Phil, and I'll let you take them through what is this Cradle to Career and how does it relate to all this stuff we just talked about.
Very good.
And someone will drive for you, I think.
What do I do to
Todd in back does it, and he's just got you up now.
All right, very good.
So if you want the next slide, just say next slide.
This has been a wonderful day to be in the audience. It's been great listening to all these presentations. It's very exciting. And it ties very well to what I'm going to tell you about. I'm the project director of a new Columbia coalition of community leaders called Cradle to Career Columbia. And our mission is to further more systematic and comprehensive collaboration between the school district, the community agencies that serve children, and the government agencies that serve children in order to try to improve student outcomes. That's basically our mission. And we believe that the combination of greater collaboration and intensive data mining, which is sort of the landmark of the Cradle to Career efforts in other cities, is really looking at local data to try to identify the strategies that seem to be working in places in the community and then replicating them so that we help more children succeed. And let me tell you a little bit about why we think this will be a good idea. Let's see.
You can page it forward there.
I can't take it forward there.
What's not working? I can. Todd switches to me. Try your space bar, Phil.
I'll try my space bar. There we go. All right. Every decade or so, for those of you who have as many gray hairs as I do, you'll know every decade or so we have a spate of crimes that occur very quickly one after the other, and there's a brief period of attention to the schools where folks ask, gee whiz, what's happening with our young folks? And we know that success in school and encounters with the criminal justice system are related. One Department of Justice study found that 3 out of 4 people in prison during the year they did the study had not graduated from high school with their graduating classes. Another one more recently found that 3 out of 4 incarcerated individuals could not read proficiently. So we know that there are connections, and it's not really rocket science, that your life prospects are worse when you're not succeeding at school. Teachers know that these risks exist, and they know it early. 1 in 10 children who are not proficient readers in 3rd grade, 1 in 10, will ever be a proficient reader. 4 times the number. If you are not a proficient reader in 3rd grade, the odds that you will drop out of school multiply 4 times. And we know that educational success matters. I think maybe I'm preaching to the converted here, but we hear a lot about how college graduates are struggling now to find good opportunities. And it's leading sometimes, I think, perhaps to the mistaken assumption that there's not a huge premium for educational attainment. And in fact, it's just the other way around. The college graduates are having a harder time finding work. The high school graduates aren't finding work at all, and for a high school dropout, it's become virtually impossible. They become unemployable. So you had push down all the way, but the return on investment still is huge. The more school you've completed successfully, the less likely you are to be laid off, the more likely you are to be rehired, the higher your lifetime earnings, and so on. I mean, the data is pretty dramatic. Now, unfortunately, success isn't evenly distributed. In particular, poverty is a huge predictor of struggles. It puts huge obstacles in the way of children to succeed. And that shows up. Columbia, turns out, despite the fact that we think of ourselves as a pretty affluent middle-class community, progressive community, we are not immune from these data. And so if we look at the 3rd grade MAP scores, you can see free and reduced lunch kids in 2013, 26% were proficient readers in third grade, whereas the paid lunch students, it's 65%, right? So we're talking a 40% difference in success in third grade. If this pattern continues all the way through school to high school. The green line here is the free and reduced lunch numbers, and you can see they're below that of our Caucasian students. I don't have a paid lunch number for that particular statistic. So at all the stages in between, students who come from low-income backgrounds face real obstacles to success. And because poverty is such an important predictor, it's not surprising that we see that it has an impact on the outcomes of our African American kids. Race and poverty are tightly linked in Columbia. I don't have any national data, but you can see from this slide here, which is not up to date, it's only to 2009, but it shows that African American kids are 3 times as likely to have to face the struggles of poverty as are white students, and that 4 out of 5 of those students have that social circumstance to overcome, that hill to climb. That's an enormous number, particularly, as I say, when you think about the picture that we all like to see when we think about Columbia. So there's work to be done, of course, outside of the schools to change that. But one way to change that, of course, is to change education. It's not surprising that you see those free and reduced lunch numbers, because these are census data from 2009, and the top one should be labeled the white family income distribution. And you can see that's sort of a normal bell curve there, the top one of a large middle class in the middle, and then fewer people at the lower and upper extremes. And then the lower chart is a distribution of median family income for black families in Columbia. And you can see there a rather shocking lack of a middle class. This is a history that we all come with to the table in terms of deciding what kind of work we have to do. And that's reflected in the third grade communication arts numbers, as you would expect. Now, unfortunately, the background of all this is getting worse rather than better, that the poverty rate overall across the country is rising. And of course, in Columbia, you all have been hearing from Dr. Belcher, I know, about how the numbers in Columbia have gone from 30% a decade ago, less than a decade ago, to about almost 40% now. And it's doubly bad because not only are the number of students with economic challenges rising, but recent data, actually 2 different ways of looking at the data recently, have shown that for the kids who come with the economic disadvantage, the disparity in their outcomes is rising. So not only are there more kids with economic challenges, but the kids with economic challenges are falling farther behind their classmates. And that's true. If you look at our third grade scores, for example, you'll see these trends over the years, and it's very slightly, but widening. The two lines are widening. 40%. Well, I think one of the reasons why Cradle to Career Columbia was created is that no city can prosper if you have a huge fraction of your students who are struggling. These are going to be our neighbors. These are the folks when we're retiring who are going to be running the city. And they have to be succeeding at school. And we have huge obstacles here to making that happen. And one of the things that I know Dr. Belcher's experienced, and probably all of his predecessors as well, is that no single agency can get it done. Not the schools, not Head Start, not the after-school programs. It's just a bigger problem to solve than that, to help kids get over those barriers. Unfortunately, one of the natural things to do when you see bad numbers that you think you'd like to see improve considerably is to make sure you're not the one held responsible. And I love this cartoon, which essentially has everyone pointing the finger at someone else. It's not the schools, it's the parents. No, it's not the parents, it's the after-school agencies, and so on. And the reason I'm here is that others, not I, got together, Dr. Belcher and many others in the community got together and sort of had a moment of of like-mindedness where they concluded that something more needed to be done, and that the traditional effort of doing it from the schools exclusively or maybe with small partnerships needed some supplementation, and they wondered who pulled it off, who was able to get all the people in the community to talk to each other without the territoriality that normally exists whenever multiple agencies all get in one room. And so the eyes, rather remarkable, all seem to point towards Cincinnati. There's an effort there called the Strive Partnership that had managed to bring people together from across the community. Not everyone, only the willing players, but they had huge buy-in, and they were able to move some of the outcomes, improve some of the student outcomes. And so the United Way was looking at Strive, the Youth Community Coalition was looking at Strive, the City Department of Health and their Social Services Commission were looking at Strive, and Dr. Belcher said, well, that sounds very interesting. And so then the World Cafe occurred, in which Jeff Edmondson, the director of the Strive project in Cincinnati, came to the school district, to the city, to talk about the Strive program. There are over 100 cities that have also read about Strive and all want to be part of the team. So they've imposed some requirements, and we were happy to say we've put enough of our infrastructure together, so we just recently got inducted into the club. What's their approach? One, bring cross-sector community leaders together. I think we've done that. There's more work to be done for sure, but we have a good start. Identify key educational outcomes to improve. We have done that through both the Leadership Council that's been put together and some of the working groups that help them out. So we have. And then the third step is to partner with community agencies to use local data to find strategies at work. And that's actually, of course, the real work, and that's our next step. So the hard work still is yet to come. But we're excited about it because there is evidence that doing community work this way can make a difference. And I'm getting close to the end. In one community, domestic abuse was reduced by studying which strategies among the counseling agencies were having the most effect. And they looked, and this is reverse engineering using local data. They found that agencies that had the best outcomes turned out to be ones that were doing more of their counseling individually. And they had less repeat occurrences under those circumstances. So they used their own data to try to find out what's working best and why. Another community had great success in increasing college enrollments because they studied their local data, and they found that college matriculation rates were higher in a few low-income schools than they were in others in the community. This is a big community, and they had lots of high schools. And so they found a few had much better rates with comparable demographics. And so again, they reverse engineered. They started to ask, okay, we found some success stories. What are they doing differently? And as they began to use their local data, they found that the ones that were having most success were doing more one-on-one, face-to-face assistance with financial aid forms. That was, turned out, was an obstacle that a lot of families that are first generation just found really daunting. And any of you who've got college kids know exactly what they experienced. So
from our last FAFSA to fill out.
Yeah, but it turned out that giving that kind of help made financial aid seem possible. Financial aid made college seem possible, and so it changed the number of students who were first generation students who were getting into school. So the lesson from that, we hope, is that rather than having that circular firing squad or finger pointing, that we can try to by working together, have more like a barn raising, where we all work together and we use data. But of course, a key aspect of that is access to data, and that you can't make these programs work without the school district agreeing to participate. So what have we done so far? You can't read this on the screen, but if you have a handout, you'll see we've tried to put together a community-wide coalition that has the mayor, the superintendent of schools, the head of the United Way, a member of the school board, head of the housing authority, 3 business leaders, and so on. It's a good group, and they've been working very hard and coming to meetings regularly when they have lots of other things to do. So we've been just delighted to have that kind of participation, and they have rolled up their sleeves and looked at what's happening in other cities, looked at the National United Way community impact goals, looked at the school district's targeted outcomes, and then looked at what Strive partnerships are doing in other cities and come up with 5 target outcomes to focus our collaborative coalitions. Kindergarten readiness, 3rd grade reading, middle school transitions, high school graduation with college or career skills, which is why this conversation tonight was really so wonderful. It was only getting involved in this project that led me to realize that you could actually graduate from high school and not be ready for the next step. And so this is just, you guys are doing exactly the right thing, and it's delightful to hear about it. And then finally, entering and completing a college or career training, some sort of post-secondary training. And we've come up with the help at every stage of half a dozen members of the staff and faculty of the school district to help come up with measurements which will tell us whether the community is making progress. That's on a slide that I won't show you, but we're working still on getting assessments that will tell the story for the community, and we'll report them every year. Part of this process is to have a report card that we report every year, and the brave communities actually start setting targets. Mm-hmm. So what's our next step? Collaborative Action Network. So if you look at the community and you say, okay, you've got this giant Goliath, the school district, then you have lots of little smaller not-for-profits and government agencies that are circling all around. You got higher ed institutions. You have coalitions that are already exist, the Youth Community Coalition, Project Launch at the university, and they're just a couple to illustrate that you've got existing coalitions. And then you have funders, the United Way's Education grants, the Boone County Community Services Advisory Commission. Hopefully the new Boone County Children's Services Board will be looking at things that youth well-being that's going to be directly relevant to the work that you all do as educators. And then business partnerships, maybe thinking things like apprenticeships and the like. So you've got all these players. Our hope and the task we've assigned to ourselves is to pick a few. Maybe say we were to pick kindergarten readiness as one initial goal, and then to create a coalition so that it crosses all those boundaries, so that you don't have the silos, you cross the boundaries. Same thing would be true, say, of transition out of middle school and then the career. So that's our plan. We very much need the school district to be a partner and a leader, and we hope that you will be. Any questions?
You know, I don't have a question. I think I have more of a comment, but I know when we went to the World Cafe back in what's the guy's name from Ohio? Jeff. The one thing that he talked about that really stuck with me was the importance of you show the community one simple document on your progress and what your goals, so the community can wrap their arms around it. And I serve on the Education Advisory Committee for the United Way, and it's nice that as the United Way is talking about kindergarten readiness, reading on grade level, middle school transition, and now the Strive is doing that, hopefully there'll be more steam picked up on the importance of, if for lack of it, those first 3. And the focus on those has been pretty incredible. And we're going to actually add Belinda Masters to that group starting Thursday when we have our next meeting. So we'll have an elementary and a secondary person on that advisory group. So hopefully that will really assist with that.
What communities that have had good success tell us is that alignment of effort toward a few common indicators really makes a difference. Now, it isn't as if every agency is going to point to the same indicators, but the more you can get that decide, okay, let's talk about 3rd grade reading, or let's talk about transition out of middle school, and have a couple of metrics where we're going to use it, whether it's attendance or getting 6 credits in 9th grade. Some way we're going to measure whether more students are making that transition, whether adrenaline kicks in, but the hormones kick in. and then align our efforts. So the city, or rather, city-county Community Services Commission has been in these meetings, so they were part of
Right.
selecting these outcome data. Of course, the school district was part of it, so these line up with,
Right.
there's nothing inconsistent here with any of your CSIP.
Right. Well, and we've kind of measured Dr. Belcher to those same goal. I mean, that
Yeah.
in this last year and a half, 2 years, we've simplified, in effect, or trying to.
So what our hope is that by aligning the targets that the various important role players in the community have, that then the school district and the agencies will all find it in their own interests to try to aim at practices that will move those needles. That's really the key in the end, and we've yet to make the case to the agencies. That's our next step, is to convince the agencies and government services agencies, as well as governmental, as well as private and nonprofit, that it's a good idea to get together and, at least for some of their work, to focus on these indicators that are closest to their mission, and see if in 5 years we'll see progress. Because it sure resists effort when you act by yourself.
You know, I think there's also that concern, I mean, like, two of us that happen to be serving on the leadership committee now are not necessarily going to be associated directly with the school district, but having that buy-in from all those groups, because there's a concern, okay, this is just another effort that's going to go away
Right.
in a year. I got worried when I saw that the United Way was $1 million behind, you know, I said, okay, now are they not going to be able to participate, you know, in this? And because there's going to be some, and we're going to talk about that at the leadership committee, you know, as far as you know, executive director and all that type of thing, and your sustained funding and how you do that. So, but that's I think one thing to speak to this board about is to hopefully maintain that desire to be a part of that
Right.
community effort.
Yes, and also that United Way raises $3.5 million on a good year to help these things, but as a community, we raise about $65 million for various not-for-profit support issues. That's a lot of resource in this community, but it's the arrows are going a lot of different ways. And sometimes that's okay. There's some senior services that are going to be different arrows than we go. But a lot of them need to be aligned, and this is meant to try to help line up some of those arrows, because United Way is one of the funding players, but there's lots of others that Phil mentioned are coming forward. How do you really generate that cultural climate in a community that gears this way? And it's hard work. So Phil he explained this better in 30 minutes than I've ever heard anyone explain this whole model. So I appreciate it, because it's hard to really say how you're trying to wrap this up in a big picture. But you know, we're off the ground. It took 2.5 years to get off the ground.
I hope without scaring anyone, I can say also that continuous quality improvement is implicit in this model and explicit when you dig deeply enough into all the documents. It's this idea that you find things that work, expand them, and then you can go to funders and say, this is working. And would you be willing to do more of it, as opposed to just saying, double our budget and things will get better.
Yeah.
That's sort of like when you asked Jim, how are we going to, in the future, we talked about Extra Career Center, you know, that private funding is an option, or these social impact bonds are an option, but you have to prove that the effort's going to work, and that's, you know, the funding for the future.
Right. So,
Well, and I think-
measuring.
And all of this potentially points to a community school too, as a way to tie all of these together in a place, you know, based approach.
Yeah.
And I appreciate what you were just saying, Dr. Belcher, about the United Way as a piece of the big funding picture, and so as we look at local funding sources and trying to herd them in the direction of choosing a few measures, we also need to be looking at the funding sources outside of our community that are investing in our community. And, you know, I'm thinking of CMCA and the resources that we bring into the community that, you know, our parameters are way outside of any of the local conversation. And I think that the more we can show the local impact, the more we can change the mindset of some of the broader funders outside of Columbia too. So it's just really going to build momentum, I think.
Phil, where you're at on your timetable of getting things done and kind of kicking this thing off? And you talked about a 5-year plan, but there's, within that 5-year plan, you got key points that you want to hit.
Yes.
And what happens at those key points?
Well, really the most important points are this first year, now that we spent 3 years just getting everybody to come to the table, agree sort of that nobody's in charge, but everybody's in charge, and come up with our outcomes, our target outcomes, which involves creating working groups from communities and the schools to get together and pick some tests. So we have tests or assessments that will be used for all those 5 benchmarks. That's what got us into the Strive network, is that we have the infrastructure in place, but we actually haven't done any of the important work yet. And so for me, the next 12 months will be creating probably 2, possibly 1, possibly 3. The council hasn't decided, but we're now at the point where they'll have to pick priorities of which of these outcomes to start with, and then to make the case to the agencies in town and to the district, to appropriate people in the district, that they should come together and work on look at all the data, we'll pull as much data as we can from everywhere, and see whether there's an opportunity, let's say, for 3rd grade reading, or an opportunity for kindergarten readiness, or here we heard tonight, maybe an opportunity for career, for changing those numbers so that those 180-day numbers 5 years from now look different. So so at the end of the year, I'd like to see an action plan on at least 1 coalition. And the action plan, then people would start doing it, and we'd start measuring. And if it's making a difference, you ask more agencies to join and do it, and ask the school district to expand it if it's a pilot program. And if it's not making a difference, the value of measuring it is you say, all right, it's time for another idea. Who's got another good idea? But instead of just doing something forever once you start it.